As a nurse and as a Palestinian, I feel compelled to continue speaking about the medical situation in Gaza as it continues to deteriorate, because it has gotten even worse since I made that.
Even if humanitarian aid was to get to the people of Gaza right now, their health has been permanently and forever changed. Hi, my name is Evan. I'm a bioethicist, and I specialize in misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy theories as a threat to public health. Right now, a lot of people, especially the media, are sharing the death toll, and that's really important. But I want you all to understand that the death toll is probably quadruple or more that. And I don't mean that based on the people that are missing under rubble. I mean that in terms of the things we don't ascribe to a death toll when these things happen. Because in a community of 2 million people where 1 million are displaced, you have to remember that there is ongoing and consistent health care that those folks would have needed on a regular day-to-day basis. At this point, people have lost their lives to their chronic illnesses like diabetes and hypertension. There are people who have missed enough chemotherapy where their cancer is metastasizing. There's emergency care that just can't be provided to women going into labor who are having infants that need a certain kind of care above and beyond. There are tools and machines that premature babies do not have access to, and so they will also lose their lives. And those are the things that are happening in the immediate, right now. But there's also what the environment is doing to everyone as they are stuck in place. There are the remains of people and pets and all sorts of other things that are decaying under rubble. And decaying tissue gives off all sorts of things. It attracts, first of all, insect activity, which builds up in the environment, but it also gives off all sorts of gases, as well as bacterium sets in. This creates a really toxic space to be in, and really has a detrimental effect on your health. Missiles, projectiles, or any sort of explosives have a host of carcinogens in them, and those carcinogens are given off in the immediate, but they also leach into the environment. And as long as people are standing around and within that environment, they are breathing it in, or they are absorbing it in all sorts of ways, either through the water they're drinking or the food they're consuming. Places that were hit and then caught fire, anything that was in that fire burns at a very high rate, and that high rate gives off even more carcinogens that we know are cancer causing. This is why there's such a high percentage of firefighters that develop an inordinate amount of cancers, particularly around the areas that remain exposed in the breaks in their suit. So throat cancer, and like cancer in their groin. There's not a functional system to get rid of all sorts of waste that people produce. That is trash that you produce from food or producing food of any sort, and as well as like your own waste, like human excrement. This means that diseases that set in when there isn't a functional way to pull waste away from people and their living spaces sets in, like cholera. There's no way to test for things. So if someone starts to develop symptoms of something, there's no way to know what they're experiencing symptomatically, because right now every hospital is in a triage situation where they're caring for the acutely hurt. And for those of you who have stopped thinking about it, we are still existing in a pandemic. So this means that all the people that are seeking shelter or seeking safety together are at risk of developing COVID. All of these things will have a long-term effect on these people's lives, and it will result in a shortening of their lives, as well as a whole bunch of other health conditions that we won't know until time passes. And what we don't do is we don't ascribe to the death toll someone who passes away from a cancer that they developed 8, 10, 12 years later that is directly related to the exposures they experienced during a violent bombardment of their home. We don't add to that death toll people who will take their own lives in the future because of PTSD or all sorts of depression and other mental health issues that will develop from this in this experience. Also, all of this physical, mental, and emotional trauma cause epigenetic changes, which means that these are not the only people that will be injured, but their generational trauma will live on in a cellular level that can affect the generation that comes after them and the person after them, all the way down to a grandchild or a great-grandchild, genetically. And I want to bring this back around to two things that Crutches and Spice consistently talks about, which is something being a disabling event and that disability and ableism is used or weaponized as part of racism. What is happening in Gaza is disabling the entire population. And what will happen later is through ableism, plenty of these surrounding countries and states and groups will refuse assistance in the long term to Palestinians as a population, citing a number of symptoms or issues that are going to be directly related to the disabling that they're experiencing right now. The same way that slave owners would disable enslaved Black people by punishing them for not doing enough work or for running away or for talking back or for any number of reasons, physically disabling them with corporeal punishment was then used as proof that Black people were lazy because they had a shuffle or because they were bent over or because they were now physically incapable of running away. And the act of calling them lazy to the point that it became stereotyped was then used as the reasoning for why they should remain enslaved, because enslavement was good for their minds and would make them useful. Otherwise, they would just rot away being lazy. The design isn't just to take life now, it is to take life later, it is to disable life, and it is to render a group of people subhuman through a number of disabling events. Because then it becomes easy to convince the rest of us that a population isn't valuable and doesn't deserve our sympathy, empathy, or humanity because they are useless. It's important for us to understand how events like this, how things like war affect us long after peace or ceasefires have been implemented. It is not enough to stop what is happening because there are long-term consequences that affect us for life.